Icons 8 Music.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Sim-portant Conversations at SD State. It is your Master of Ceremonies, Patrick Verley here. Looking forward to having another podcast session with our team of simulationists across our 4 College of Nursing sites. Today, we will be looking at the role of the healthcare simulation technology specialist. And these are really the individuals at each of our locations that fulfill really a multitude of different roles in reference to their different titles. And so we're going to start this episode with our different technology specialists telling us a little bit more about who they are, what their background is in, and what brought them to simulation. So I think we'll start with Kate. If you would like to start us off, please.
Hi, yeah, my name is Kate Jansen. I am the Simulation and Learning Lab Technician at Rapid City site, and I am kind of one of those classic people who can say simulation found me. I did not find it. Literally, it was kind of a needle in a haystack kind of job that I randomly stumbled upon in a time when I was very, very much grateful to have stumbled upon it. I wasn't really sure where my career was going to lead me and what that even meant. So when I found this job, I was very excited because I'm kind of a Jack or a Jill, if you will, of all trades, master of none with a pharmaceutical science degree. So I was having a lot of trouble finding where I fit, and I am loving fitting into the simulation technician role.
Great, thanks, Kate. And it sounds like, as I hear you talk about some of your roles and responsibilities, it sounds like being that Jill of all trades is really well suited to
Yes.
those roles of yours.
Yes, and it really blends my strengths and my experiences pretty well, which is cool.
Great, excellent. Okay, well, we're happy to have you. And then we will go to Miss Jackie.
So my name's Jackie. I'm the simulation education specialist at our Brookings site, and I have worked, I'm a nurse, and my background is in OB nursing, and so for years and years I was a clinical instructor with students in the OB area, and then I would fill in on campus to kind of round out my to get full-time hours, helping in the on-campus lab and just doing all kinds of, I was kind of a jack of all trades in my off time too. And then simulation just kind of evolved over time for me. I was here when we got our very first mannequins, and we didn't know what the heck to do with them even, and they laid in a bed in the students. We had a room that the students had rocking chairs and refrigerators and kind of the student hangout room, and there was a mannequin in there too. And we've grown from that time to now where we have six different simulation rooms and just a crazy amount of technology, and the mannequins that can do so much more than those very beginning ones did. So the more simulation took off at our site, the more they needed me to help with it, I guess. So yeah, no, that's a big part of what I do here.
Oh, wow. That's so neat, Jackie. Thanks for sharing all that. So really a lot of evolution and change throughout your tenure with the college. And I would suspect that you can have a really deep appreciation for how cutting edge the College of Nursing is currently with simulation, given your frame of reference for what it used to look like. And certainly how your role has changed throughout that time as simulation has changed.
Yeah, we used at one time, like, this really dates me, but simulation was a game, like almost like a card game or a board game that we played to try to role play the different things that you do as a nurse. So apologize, there's construction going on all around me here.
Oh, phew. No worries. Yeah. And I think even as we talk about the role of the simulationist, just how general that is, right? And I think sometimes people think of simulation in a really narrowed, through a narrowed lens, but it really is so all-encompassing. Interesting. And then finally, we'll move to Diane.
Well, I'm Diane, and I am the Healthcare Simulation Education Technician for Sioux Falls. It's a mouthful. I kind of accidentally fell into simulation as well back in 2014. I saw an ad for a college looking for somebody to work in their nursing lab, ordering supplies, setting up for lab, that kind of thing. There was no mention of simulation in the job description on Indeed. And when I went down, then they were like, oh yeah, this is this. And then, you would be doing this, and they had these simulators. And so I kind of fell into it, kind of like Kate did, and fell in love with it and have been rolling with it ever since.
One other question I want to ask you about, Diane, is can you tell us a little bit about the certification in simulation that you hold?
Yes, last spring, I received my CHSOS, which is the Certification for Healthcare Simulation Operations Specialists. It goes along with the CHSE that educators can get. Just certification, meaning, you're looking at the standards, following the standards. Doesn't mean you have to know everything, but you know where your resources are, how to find them, and how to work with your simulation team.
Wow. So you have one of the most verbose titles, but then also a very lengthy title to your certification.
Correct.
I would suspect that you need a bottle of water every time you recite your email signature.
Pretty much, there's some letters behind there now. So who would have ever guessed, right?
Well, I'm entirely confident that Credential supports our student learning and indeed the College of Nursing mission as well.
That had been a long time goal of mine. Once I actually got started in simulation and figured out what it was, and then started, looking at the standards and that kind of thing, I had set that up as a personal goal a few years ago. But you have to work in the simulation field for 2 to 3 years before you can ever, think about taking the test. And so I figured once 5 years had gone by, it was maybe time to bite the bullet and do it.
No time like the present.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much to each of you for those fantastic SIM introductions. We will now move on into the next thing we want to talk about today, which is really how do these different roles fit within the term of simulationist. As we alluded to, simulationist is really a very broad term and encompasses many different roles and responsibilities. So Diane, would you mind sharing a little bit about how this role of the healthcare simulation technology specialist fits within that simulationist umbrella?
Sure. When you look at simulation and sim design and all that goes with it, it really kind of boils down to like 3 things. You've got your content expert, your facilitator. That's kind of one role. A lot of places, those are kind of rolled into one. Your content expert, your facilitator, a lot of times those are usually the educator role. You've got your operations specialist, and that's the technician role, where that person deals with the whole setting up and creating the vision to what the content expert / facilitator have come up with. And then you have the learner, and ultimately the content expert, facilitator, operations specialist, those 2 work together to provide everything for the learner to meet their learning goals and their outcomes and that. So it's a big team approach, but the operations person is more of making that vision come to life.
I see. So you're acting kind of as that bridge between the person that designs the sim and then the actual end user or the learner in this case.
Correct. And there's a lot of teamwork that goes back and forth between the facilitator, the content expert, and the person that's setting up. The person that the operations specialist technologist, whatever you want to call that person, knows what equipment and things that you have available to help make that vision come across a little bit better.
Yeah, I think about, even for me, as I learn more about simulation and in hosting this podcast series, and reflecting on just how much I underestimated really what all goes into producing a single simulation experience. And I think that as we learn more about the many different things that need to be taken into consideration, make a more high fidelity experience for students in our simulation center.
Yeah, the closer we can get to the actual, whether it be clinic, hospital setting, whatever, home setting, whatever you're trying to, portray, the better.
Yeah. Good. And I always trying to get support students in understanding that this is, as Jackie mentioned earlier, this isn't just a game that we're playing, right? This really is a very evidence-based strategy and very helpful and impactful for your learning.
Yes.
And again, just the complexity of it that I, as what I'll term a simpleton, right? Someone who isn't a simulation expert or a simulationist, things that I just really wasn't aware of or sensitive to. All right, well, thank you, Diane, for that explanation. And so I think that will do us service well as we move on to the next session here, or component of our episode, where we're going to really be talking about what each of our healthcare simulation technology specialists finds exciting about their role, and really what makes them want to come back to work every day. So Jackie, would you mind teeing us off with this discussion, please?
Sure. So nursing students are some pretty special people in my book anyway, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to support their learning and help them grow. And it's probably the most rewarding to me when you get to be in the middle of a simulation and we talked about realism and how important it is on our end to make things as real as possible, but they also have to buy into the realism of it. And when they do, and you see what rock stars they really are, that's a pretty cool experience. I had the experience once of I had to play an elderly woman whose husband was dying. And this young man, this young nursing student, he was just so into it. And he held my hand and he rubbed my back. And I really sensed every bit of his compassion, and just made me proud to know that he was somebody that we were helping to go out into the world and make it a better place. So I guess that's it for me. And then also, I always think about when you have students, I mean, they really can learn from each other and be role models for each other. Sometimes you have a really strong student like that, and other students are maybe just a little bit more nervous or timid, and they can just learn so much from watching the other students in action, where they might not have the opportunity to do that. We can learn from other, as a clinical instructor and nurses on the floor. Those are wonderful role models, but I don't think that nursing students always get to see each other in action like they do during simulation.
Wow, that's really a neat story. Thanks for sharing that, Jackie. And to think, like you say, that student's going to go out and be representing the College of Nursing and know that their future patients are in really great hands. I think, as you mentioned, having students buy into it, again, I think that's a big challenge, is that students oftentimes have that preconceived notion that this isn't real, it's not a real facility, it's not a real patient. So it's maybe not as important as clinical, but as you pointed out, there's actually a lot of opportunities in simulation that you don't have in a traditional clinical experience. And so I think as excited as simulationists might get about it, it's kind of a moot point if the students don't also find the value in it, like you say, right? So having it be more than just an academic discussion, but actually getting their buy-in and getting them excited about it as well, and to see the value of it, I think is really important. Okay, so then let's go ahead and move on to Kate.
Yeah, so my favorite part of simulation is, well, to be frank, that it's really fun. It's very, very unique position that isn't just a job, which I think is what most of us make it a goal for our careers, is being able to wake up and do something that doesn't feel like a job. And two aspects of this particular job, although it is still called that I enjoy most is creating high fidelity situations and using creative portrayal to really enhance the learner experience as much as possible. I see those things as our top tools to achieve that top priority, which, like I said, is having, or like Jackie was saying, having the best possible learner experience. Fidelity is a specific term that we use in the simulation world to describe very specifically what we mean by realism. And there's different ways that we do that, primarily through the simulators that we use. There's 3 different levels of fidelity. Of course, the ideal situation would to be in a real clinical setting, but that's not always possible. And that's why simulation was created, to really give the learners a safe place to hone their skills before going out into the clinical setting. So that is our standard, if you will, but because that's not always possible, we have 3 others, and those include basic task trainers is going to be our lowest fidelity. So like an IV arm that they're going to be practicing IV insertion on. It's literally just an arm that lays on the table that's connected to blood bags. Moving up from there, we have our simulators or mannequins. And as Jackie was describing, they have really evolved over the last decade or so to really have some pretty cool tech in them that allows us to do some crazy stuff that sometimes can be a little creepy if it's just you and the mannequin, but also can allow us to give the learners a really cool experience that a lot of them don't actually expect. It's really cool to see them come into the room for the first time and see our mannequins and say, that can do that. And then, of course, our highest fidelity situation in the sim lab is going to be what we call a standardized patient, or SP. And that is one of my favorite roles. Is I call it playing the patient. Jackie was describing this situation where she was experiencing firsthand the compassion that our students show. And that was a situation where she would have been playing the patient or acting as the standardized patient. So that's my favorite part, because you get to really directly experience the impact that you have on these students, which is something that you don't really get to experience in the real world all that often, because everything moves so quickly. And so it's really cool to be a part of this evolution of a person.
Well, and I think that provides a great example of how, as you talk about fidelity, and how, taking those painstaking measures to ensure high fidelity is impactful for our students. And as I hear Jackie talk about how simulation has really evolved over the years, thinking back to, how do we maybe define high fidelity differently than we did when, simulation was a board game, for instance, right? And I think, certainly there's a time and a place for board games in nursing school potentially, but then understanding that simulation is, in the contemporary, generally regarded as different than that. I remember even in my own master's program learning about how simulation, again, because it is so broad, as you mentioned, Kate, the mannequin arm that you use to practice venipuncture on, that is simulation. And before learning that, I had thought that simulation was only, a full body mannequin with someone providing a voice for a patient. And learning that simulation is actually much more broad than that. It can actually manifest in many different ways. So the third individual that I want to talk to then about your exciting aspects of your role would be Diane.
Thanks, Patrick. I really like playing with moulage. That to me, that's fun. It's not just making blood and guts and any other bodily fluids. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into moulage and the realism of the sim together. When I worked at a previous place, what we did as an activity to increase realism for students was to take them out. The facilities management people were kind enough to set up a obstacle course with cones out on an open area of the school, and let us take the gator. And we took all of the glasses, the eye disorder glasses, the macular degeneration, the cataracts, the glaucomas. We took those glasses along with, walkers, canes, wheelchairs, and the students had to pick an eye disorder and then pick either a cane or walker, get in, drive the skater around the obstacle course, and then park it back in the garage, so to say, which was between two cones. It just provided students with a new understanding of the geriatric population and, what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So your moulage doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be, it's not always gory, but just finding the right tools to get the point across to help the learners. You don't want your moulage to distract from anything. You don't want to make anything so incredibly hideous that, the students are just like, what is that, and afraid to carry on. You don't want to distract from anything, but you really want to use that to enhance. So I love to practice making blood clots, which my family thinks is really disgusting. My son thinks I work in a house of horrors, all that kind of stuff, which is really, but I enjoy trying to constantly improve and make things better, constantly tweaking things and trying to find a better way, an easier way to do things.
Yeah, and as I'm learning and working with the simulationist team, that really iterative process of constantly quality improvement is so I think important as we think about how we're achieving those simulation standards here in the College of Nursing. Diane, if I could, for those simpletons listening, including myself, I was hoping that you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on what moulage is and what some examples of that might include beyond those that you've shared already.
Moulage is anything that you can add in to make whatever you are trying to create real, whether it be a wound, creating, when we run a trauma sim, poor little baby Hayden has a laceration on his arm, we have a reusable one, and reusable is great, but the wound is already built, but adding in the dried blood and the fresh blood, those kind of things. Moulage is also theater makeup. Adding the wrinkles and the lines to make yourself look older, whether it's putting a silicone mask on or, the clothing for the appropriate scene. The patient was just in an ATV accident, so having the torn clothes, the dirty clothes, all of that is considered moulage, as well as your setting. Are we in the home setting? When we visit our little elderly Frida at home, she's got stuff all over. She's a little bit of a hoarder. So, hey, you do with the best with what you can. Each site is different throughout SDSU. So you make the best with what you have available.
Yeah, being innovative in making this moulage, I suspect, is important.
Yes, thinking outside of the box, being creative, and the other thing is you want easy cleanup too. I mean, you don't want
Yeah, it's like the cooking shows.
Right.
Yeah, one pot moulage, you could have a cookbook on that, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't know, and again, this such a humbling experience. I didn't realize that moulage included, like you said, outfits and the physical space. I too thought moulage was basically bodily fluids, period. And I don't think I'm alone in having that preconceived notion about moulage, right?
Right.
and she's going to be upset with me for mentioning it, but Takara had shared or had done for a number of semesters, make your own stool in her pathophysiology course. And she had spent time and money in coming up with these grocery supplies that she brought in for the students. And they had to, I'm talking about this for Takara, which is quite rude of me, but I know she wouldn't talk about it herself. She had students depict these different GI disorders through the use of these different groceries and food products that she brought in. And I think that that's definitely an experience that the students will remember and take with them well after their date of graduation.
Now, the other thing to throw in on, and I was fortunate enough to judge part of that episode, which was a lot of fun. But the other thing that goes in with that, that I think that goes with moulage is the odor portion. Sometimes creating, the odor as they open, David Kahn's bag, that he has been, homeless and whatnot. And, there's possibly some, extremely dirty clothes in there, or, different things like that. Creating odors go with that as well. Smell to me is a huge trigger to remember different things.
Well, not for the first time. I've learned a lot and certainly have a much more broader understanding of what moulage is now. It's not just scabs.
No.
That's my takeaway.
Scabs plus.
Yeah. Can I get that embroidered on a pillow? Okay. I have to admit, as I'm thinking about Diane's scabs plus, I find myself thinking about an opportunity where you could have your own company, Diane, that produces moulage supplies, and then you'd be called Scabs Plus. It has,
that's
like
an awesome name.
Yeah, we need to patent that. So
there we go.
Copyright pending. Let's see. So the next thing we want to talk about is technology and of course its application within simulation. And so I'm going to just kind of open it up to our three technology specialists here to talk a little bit more about the role of technology within your work.
The role of technology, of course, is very significant, as most of our titles include technician in most of them. One thing that's really cool about the team that we work with is we're constantly bouncing ideas off of each other and going to each other for problem solving. And it's a really cool dynamic. And one thing I'm looking forward to regarding that is we are implementing a brand new learning management system over the winter break here that is basically going to condense all of our resources into one system, which is going to make it a lot easier for us to work together as a team, not only to record simulations, but also to manage all of our supplies and track all kinds of different data for simulation. It's going to be a big learning curve because it's going to be new to all of us, but in the end, it's going to have a very positive impact on the learner experience, as we've discussed is one of our top priorities.
For sure. And I think one of the things that goes with the whole inventory piece, I don't think anybody maybe has thought about, is that should provide us with a list of all the equipment that's available. So, as faculty, when they're trying to decide what they want to do or come up with a new activity, there should be a way for them to go in and look and say, oh my gosh, we have one of these. I forgot about that. Let's pull that out and let's use it. Let's come up with something new. So that list of equipment and supplies should be available to everybody then.
Right. And another exciting new thing that we're going to implement that's a little less significant in its size is we are creating a QR code escape room experience for one of our more simpleton sims. Instead of the students just going into a room and identifying safety risks, they're going to have a puzzle they're going to have to figure out. So it's going to be more of a directed learner experience that's going to give them an opportunity to have a little fun too.
one of my favorite pieces of technology, I think, that we use, and that's it's used more in leaps and bounds, especially since COVID in the medical world, is our ability to use telehealth with the students. And that brings an element of realism for them that we never had before, where they can, we'll have a simulation where the students are taking care of a patient in the clinic, and they need to ask the expertise of a specialist, and we'll bring in our nurse practitioner students on a computer screen for them to be able to work together to evaluate the patient. So,
well, Jackie, when you talk about technology and how far we've come, one of the things that you have to get creative with your technology as well. Prior to COVID even being a thing, SDSU had received all of these robots as to use. And I was like, what the heck are we ever going to use those things for? I don't, why did they purchase these? But okay, I know they had a specific purpose, in mind when they purchased these. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and bam, we got really creative with those things in a hurry. We had students out, quarantined at home, but they were able to robot in and still participate in lab and still participate in sim. We had facilitators quarantined at home who were able to remote in through the robot and do all these, run a facilitation, a pre-brief and a debrief. We've used the robots to, in place of our current learning management system, when we've needed to move rooms and something is down. It's amazing. The robots work just kind of like a Zoom. So it's been kind of fun to, have all that technology available and to be able to use it, think outside the box and use it lots of different ways.
But of course, our technology all has a mind of its own. So problem solving is also a very big part of our role in technology. And like Diane said, I think creativity is probably the number one skill in our tool belt that we use most often, which I actually really enjoy.
Yeah, it's fun. You go in, you've got plan A set for the day, and then all of a sudden you have to flip to plan B. And then sometimes when plan B doesn't work, then wow, all of a sudden, okay, well, let's come up with a plan C on the fly. Let's roll with this.
Yeah. And I think with all of it, it just really, what the word is that I'm looking for, but it's just so important that we're part of a team and that we can all put our heads together to figure out all of this new technology and how to make it work and how to be creative with it.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things that our sim coordinator here in Rapid has said is that she's so proud of the culture that we've created in our simulation team, which is pretty cool to be a part of, especially as the newest member.
Teamwork is a lot of fun.
Gosh, there's so many great topics that were mentioned that I was wanting to circle back to all of them. And of course, now I'm so overwhelmed with thoughts. As I think about our discussion of technology and simulation, 10 years down the road, 5 years, even 2 years or less, we'll probably be having a much different talk about all of this. And I think that's what's so exciting about simulation and indeed healthcare, is that because we're in this state of constant and static change, it creates so many challenges because we're constantly trying to stay up on top of everything. But of course, that's a very exciting and humbling thing to be a part of as well. Another thing that I think about is Diane talking about really leveraging the resources and the technologies that we have. As she talks about the robots and such, I think that's really the curb cut effect, right? Where we had this thing that maybe had a very specific purpose initially, but then as new opportunities and challenges presented themselves, we were able to take advantage of things that we already had within the College of Nursing. And you all talked about the importance of collaboration, the importance of remaining flexible and adaptable and being innovative in your thinking. And those are all things that we want out of experienced nurse in the clinical setting as well, and how you've really been able to pull some of those skill sets into your role now as a simulationist technician, which I think is really exciting to see how those skills those soft skills, if you will, that you developed within the clinical setting really have translated well into your role in the contemporary as well. All right. Well, I want to, as I close here, I want to thank all of our healthcare simulation technology specialists for joining us on this episode and talking to us more about what your title means, what your background has been in, and some of the very unique contributions that you provide to not only your geographic site, but within the College of Nursing at large. And I think how it's, again, so exciting that we're able to, as one College of Nursing, again, take advantage and leverage all of the different skill sets and perspectives and experiences that each of you have within not only your capacity as the technology specialist, but then from the different practice settings and areas of expertise that you represent as well. We talked about, again, the role of technology within simulation, and then some of the things that are really exciting about this role as well, and hopefully some of the things that are on the, as we look into the future, some of the opportunities that will present themselves in moving forward with simulation. So I think that is just about all we have time for on this episode of Sim-portant Conversations at SD State. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we are sim-sighted to see you all on the very next episode. I want to wish you the best of health and wellness, and we will see you next time. Take care.